This podcast deals with themes, languages, and situations that may not be suitable for young audiences. If you're under the age of 18, parental guidance isn't going to help you here. Welcome to Now Open the Podcast, the sex education podcast that's more sex than education. I'm Trisha.
My
I'm
name is-
Kai.
And my name is the person who is forgetting whose turn it is, Jobin.
Well, this week we are talking about how patriarchy affects us all, including those it claims to uplift. And one of the, if not the biggest victim of the patriarchy, at least according to these guys, is incels. So this is part one of Incels, where we'll talk about what an incel is, the history of inceldom, and some of the language that the incel community uses. So trigger warnings, there's quite a few for this episode. We have misogyny, rape, sex, pickup artistry, bestiality, violence, murder, assault, self-harm, and suicide.
Bestiality. There's bestiality in this episode. Wow, there's a little bit of everything.
Very
mixed bag of nuts. Yeah, okay.
So if you're listening live and like what you hear, you can join the discussion by leaving the comment below. And if we have time, we'll get to them as the show goes on. So let's get right onto it.
So what exactly is an incel? So an incel is a shortened term for involuntarily celibate. They're members of an online subculture of people who define themselves as unable to find a romantic or sexual partner despite desiring one. And now, see, incels comprise of a hate group that believe that women flock to other men who are not them. And this enrages them as they feel they are owed sex by those same women.
Okay, so I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So by that definition, incels are they only a hate group, or does somebody who feels super downtrodden about not being able, who feels undesirable and sad and rejected and is angry about it, even if he's not part of a group, is he still an incel?
I think the incel label kind of comes with definition. Like you have to kind of own the term, I feel.
Okay. You have to hate women. Yeah, all right.
You have to take the term and be like, I am an incel. You know what I mean? We're going to get into that, by the way.
Okay.
Go
Ownership of the term.
Yeah, so Kai,
Or
why don't you explain to us how the term incel, which literally just means involuntary celibate, sounds pretty harmless enough and sounds like a real thing that people experience, right? Like, I don't know about y'all, but I had a period of time where I also thought I was undesirable and that nobody wanted to have sex with me. So I think this is a relatable feeling. But how did it turn from a relatable feeling to trigger warning? And we'll talk about this more in part 2, mass murder. How did we get there? What is the history?
Let's get into that. So, in the 1970s, the men's rights movement came about. And now this is where the denial of patriarchy presented men as the true victims of sexism and discrimination. So that's where it started in the 1970s, right? Moving on to the 1980s, this is when the first solo act of mass violence motivated by misogynist ideology happened in Canada as an attack on women engineering students at a college in Montreal, with the man's motivation was to fight feminism. And then here in the 1990s, That's where the term incel was coined. It wasn't even by a guy who hated women. It was by this girl named Alana. She
Hmm.
came up with this project called Alana's Involuntary Celibacy Project. And she was a bisexual woman in Toronto. And she started this forum aimed at supporting people who wanted but lacked romantic relationships. And,
Okay, so let's
well,
let
go ahead.
this we talk about like lacking romantic relationships, but we're really talking about lonely people here, right? We're really just
Right.
talking about
Like,
people who are like lacking in connections, right? People who feel sort of marginalized or rejected or by society,
right. And that's how it started, right? Like,
right?
while this forum was not designed from a misogynist worldview, the
Hmm.
audiences from pickup artists and incel communities overlapped with respect to men dissatisfied with their sexual experiences and shaped by the sexual entitlement and dehumanization towards women. So, like,
Hmm.
the forum kind of started off as like this solidarity thing for people who were involuntary celibate, right? And here
Hmm.
she coined the term incel. But the forum kind of became its own thing, and that's where like this machismo, misogynist worldview, and the idea that um the reason why they were incels
Hmm.
was women's fault, as a whole, like a blanket, like women's issue.
I
I
can see
think
that
it's
happening though. Go ahead, Trisha.
I think it's really interesting because obviously right now we're in the 1990s when the term was coined, and she seemed to have a very harmless um
um
intention here with
Hmm.
coining this. She's a person who is lonely, especially I'm guessing as a bisexual woman in the 1990s where it's difficult to find people who, accept and love you for who you are. So I can understand it from that point of view. And then when you see that men see this movement happening and see this term, it shows you just how different that men and women, I think, are kind of conditioned in society about love and relationships.
mhm,
Where with
Hmm.
women, we expect it as one of the things that we have to achieve in life, somebody to love us, to marry us.
mhm.
And we're supposed to be the more emotional sex. So, we want a partner, we want to fall in love. Meanwhile, men are here and they're conditioned to be like, women need to have sex with me.
Right, and
Like,
Yeah.
that leads me to what happens in 1994. This idea that women are should bow down to me. Women should
Mhm.
want me. In 1994, the founding of the first pickup artistry online forum happened. And
Hmm.
that's where the spreading of the belief in a sexual marketplace came about. So the sexual
Right.
marketplace was really about like how they tried to put like a structure, a code. They tried to put a code into women that could be deciphered. So there was that
Hmm.
promise by pickup artistry that you figure out the code to women and you'll get women, right?
I'm not
Um.
surprised though that that
Mhm.
happened in that environment because you get a
Mhm.
bunch of people who already feel uh, victimized by society, right? That they're
Mhm.
involuntarily celibate. They feel they're angry already, right?
Mhm.
But I don't think
Mhm.
at the start they were quite sure at who or about what. They were just lonely and sad about it. But then that in that environment, it's easy for people who for predatory behavior to also flourish. I can
Right.
also see men who already have that hatred in them preying on men who just feel victimized and blowing on that fan of hate, and how it
Mhm.
grew from the 1990s to pick up artistry in 1994. How it went from we are a group that needs to seek help together to we are an angry group of people who need to come up with a system to manipulate another group of people.
And how it got to this whole we're gonna codify women, promise the fact that once you figure out this code, this equation to women, how that whole
Mhm.
idea of pickup artistry kind of gave birth to incels as we know them today. In the early 2000s, that's when pickup artistry was on the rise. So there's that book called
Mhm.
The Game by Neil Strauss, who immersed himself in PUA culture, right? So
Yes.
Do
sexual
you do
entitlement,
you
yeah.
remember this? I think it was a dating show or some kind of
Yeah, I was on
reality TV
MTV.
show called The Game,
It was
where
based on
you
the
would
book.
No, what is that?
yeah. So they had these guys. They would teach these guys basically pick up artistry tips and things like that, and then they would watch him in like a club setting and try to pick up women. That's all the memory I have of the show. And I think if they can successfully pick up a woman or whatever, they can go to the VIP section of that club. Like that's the
Yes.
prize of the whole game
Yes.
show.
And it started a dude named Mystery who always wore like a fuzzy top hat a la Jamiroquai.
Sexy.
Yeah.
Sexy. I want
Old
that.
Peacocking,
repressed
right?
memories.
It works.
Oh my god. I remembered my ex. I just had a quick cuento. So like my
Uh-huh.
ex, there was one time I was having an interview with these students doing a thesis on like sexual empowerment, right? And I was having the hardest time like trying to like explain myself. So I was like, babe, come help me. Like give me your thoughts on this issue. And this fucking bitch, like she goes like, just so you know, I used to teach pickup artistry. And I'm like, don't fucking say that. That's so awkward. And why would you be teaching that in the first place? But I was like deep in the conversation, so I'm like,
Really interesting.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You're so proud. Okay, anyway. So in the early 2000s, pickup artistry was on the rise, and that book, The Game by Neil Strauss, was becoming more and more popular. So, this whole idea of sexual entitlement, objectification of women, dismissiveness of consent, you know, this became like a whole ideology that a lot of men were buying into, at least at the time. I mean, I'm not saying it like directly correlates to inceldom, but then at the time, that book, The Game, was really like, that was a big hit at the time, diba?
Yeah, because they were selling it. Pickup artists sell that whole thing as the playing field is inherently uneven, and pickup artistry, or being modern society doesn't value the things that you are, despite being a good person. Right? That's what it's selling to guys. So here are the tips and tricks to shortcut to brainwash people into get them to like you.
It basically told them, like, do everything in this book and you'll level the playing field for yourself. But what happened, right? In August 2009, a 48-year-old white man, a devoted follower of the PUA industry, killed 3 women at an aerobics class at Pennsylvania. And his blog recounts his justification for the attack, which goes, there was the lack of sexual and romantic relationships, and he was angry at sexually active girls and women, and all the rejection by 30 million single women. After this...
So he's saying that he murdered 3 women because all 30 single women, I'm guessing
30 million,
in America,
30 million.
30 million single women like in America or whatever, personally, individually rejected him and caused him to do this attack. That's what he says in his blog.
That's his reasoning. Exactly.
You know what? If that were true, I'd be like, yeah, you're allowed to kill people. You're allowed to. If you have personally been rejected by 30 million individuals personally to your face, you get to kill a few people. I think that should be a law. But I don't think he was.
But it has to be individual. 30 million no's.
To your
Is
face,
it possible to know 30 million women? Like to actually meet them, talk to them, right? Like,
I don't know. I don't think so, sir.
After this attack, this website called puahate.com launched, and it was a forum for men who were angry at the pickup artistry industry not for like being misogynistic assholes, but for failing to deliver the promised results of PUA.
So you're telling me that outright manipulating and in some cases directly insulting women doesn't work as a strategy? I'm shocked. I'm absolutely.
So they got really...
In a less glaring example of that is like there are dangerous diet pills for women, but we're not mad that we keep telling women to get thin. You know what I mean?
Exactly. In 2014, the Elliot Rogers Santa Barbara attack happened. No? So now this is Elliot Rogers, a 22-year-old boy,
Hmm.
who his first attack connected, whose attack was the first connected to the incel community. He killed 6 people in Santa Barbara in May 2014, and he wrote that PUA hate confirmed many of the theories that he had about how wicked and degenerate women really are. The Santa Barbara attack marks a point at which the men's misogynist incel ideology begins to coalesce as a separate movement, as a separate, unique movement organized online. So Elliot Roger became like this Jesus figure. He kills himself after the attack, and he's been seen as a patron saint and martyr for the incel community, no?
Hmm.
His
Hmm.
autobiographical manifesto became a foundational movement document. While it does not use the term incel, the perpetrator posted on Pua hate encouraging incel violence and implying his identification. He writes, if we can't solve our problems, we must destroy our problems. One day, incels will realize their true strength in numbers and will overthrow this oppressive feminist system.
Oh my gosh. We are definitely going to talk about Elliot Rogers more because I think in an
Hmm.
episode about incels, you absolutely cannot avoid it.
Hmm.
But before we get back into the discussion and before we talk about some really, really awful things after the break, we just want to announce a few good things. And I guess the big one that we want to announce is that it is now Open's first anniversary bonanza this week.
Happy birthday now,
Are we reusing
open.
the same graphic I made for Kai a year
Yes,
ago?
That's our
because
birthday
we are
graphic.
poor.
We're poor and we don't have any graphics people on our team directly. So we're reusing assets. So it is our first anniversary. Now Open is officially 1 year old tomorrow. So August 4 last year is when our first episode came out. And thank you so much to everyone who has stuck through us. This is our 47th episode. So we've been doing this pretty much almost every week for the last year. So I'm
Hmm.
super grateful to everyone who has joined in every week and continues to listen to us do this every Tuesday. So to celebrate, we have a bunch of really exciting releases. Earlier this year, we had a show that was taken down midstream due to uncensored cartoon pornography.
Twas
So
dicks.
it was a lot of things. It was
Sorry, my bad.
so the video was lost forever, and no one has ever seen or heard the second half of the episode until now. So we are finally releasing the Rule 34 episode, which was recommended by one of our customers, Randall. Shout out because I know he's listening right now. So we're releasing the entirety of Rule 34, uh, all of the audio because there's no more video. It's gone. It's disappeared forever. So you can catch the release of this episode on August 6th on Spotify. That is this Friday. Make sure to catch that. If you watch that episode or just want to catch the moment where we realized we were taken down midstream, you can listen to it on Friday. We are also releasing for the first time in now Open history, we're releasing merch. Oh my God. Can we have the happy birthday thing again? I feel like, thank you.
It warrants some graphics. Doesn't matter
So
what the
now
graphics say.
it
Graphics,
doesn't
man.
matter as long as it's like confetti
Yeah,
and pastel
it's
and stuff.
celebratory. That's enough.
So now Open teamed up with National Book Award winner Rob Cham for an exclusive anniversary t-shirt. Just burst out
Niceties.
laughing.
Formalities, I love them.
Yeah, yeah.
So Rob actually designed the first ever Now Open logo years ago before it
Hmm.
was even like
What it
long
is
before we
today.
even considered a podcast.
When this was
Rob did
happening in like a coffee shop.
Yeah, when this was happening in a coffee shop with in-person events, he did the logo. So we're really happy to have him come full circle and design a special shirt for us. So you can find the reservation form in the episode description. You can also check this banner right here, and I'm gonna drop it in the comments. So please reserve a shirt, y'all. The design is awesome,
It
and
does not
it's
look
gonna
like
be.
Nighthawks. You can be sure of that. Nobody gets that joke about us, but
Nobody
anyway,
gets
yeah.
that joke except for you, me, Fresh, and Rob. So our coffee page has also gone through some changes as well. Instead of just one membership tier at 150 pesos per month, you can support Now Open for as little as 50 pesos per month now. But if you
Ooh.
become a VIP member, a VIP customer at the 250 peso level, you get a 50% discount on all the merch that we're releasing, including the upcoming shirts. So make sure you subscribe before we release the shirts to take advantage of that discount. We're also releasing a sticker pack, which you can use that discount on, but more details on that probably by next week. Lastly, to celebrate our birthday tomorrow, we are hosting a Twitter Spaces Wednesday, August 4, 8 p.m. And this is what we're going to call the Now Open Anniversary Gangbang.
I didn't even know that. Wow.
Because we're not subtle on this show.
Yeah, yeah.
It's basically just me saying that I want to have sex with everybody who listens to
Mhm.
this podcast and is involved. But sadly, because of the pandemic, we can't have an actual gangbang. So instead, we will have a verbal gangbang over at Twitter Spaces tomorrow at 8 p.m. If you
If you're
join
lucky,
us,
Trisha will show you her new piercing.
it's audio only. So I will definitely try and show you my new piercing. I'll just describe it.
Do you hear it? Do you hear it jingling?
So tomorrow's episode is really special. We're not doing like another show. We're basically just going to talk to you guys about, well, our favorite sex ed podcast. It may not be yours, but it's definitely ours. And then you get to hang out with some of our favorite past guests. I
Mhm.
think we have Dominic Chase, our first ever guest, is going to be there. Rachel Coates, Marcos Samayo, AJ Osmeña, and so many more are joining us tomorrow. So if there are any questions you wanted to ask them during our past episodes that you didn't get to, or if there are any questions you want to ask us, whether it's related to our past episodes or not, tomorrow's your chance. So join us on our Twitter. That's at NowOpenPH at 8 p.m. for our gangbang. Clothing is optional. We won't know. It's audio only. So now back to the show. So earlier we talked about the history of incels, and we're kind of getting a little bit of an idea of how they started and how they ended up where they are today. But what I want to talk about right now is I want to talk about the ideology, a little bit of the ideology behind inceldom. And what better way to figure out what these guys are going on about than to see how they go about it. So we're going to talk about incel language. So why
Right.
language? And a little bit of an explanation as to why we're looking at language. I mean, you look at us, we our language today is so different than language before. It's so dynamic. You know, we have internet subcultures, but why language? Especially when it comes to incels, language is all about a sense of belonging. And
Mhm.
the incel vocabulary has also been kind of used to weed out people they think are spies, plants, or people who don't
Mm.
truly belong to the community. So
Infiltrators.
basically, yeah, it's basically like if you don't know how to use the code, you're not part of this community. And the things you
Ah.
believed are kind of marked by the words that you use. So it's, according to Quartz, what they call an exclusivity jargon. I know the terms, I know what's up, and I believe in this community. If you go to a Reddit subreddit, usually brain cells or some other similar subreddit, and you look through it, if you don't know the terms, it's practically gibberish. So it actually really tells you a lot about how they think about the world and, more importantly, what concepts they focus on. What do they think is important and relatable enough that it needs an entirely new word in the English language for?
And also,
And
like, putting out that much effort into a community to learn something gives you a sense of like growth. So it makes you feel like you're moving up in the community and becoming a bigger incel. So there is a sort
Yeah.
of reward to growing in the community, right? It incentivizes growing in the community because the way the more you know, the more you talk the talk, the more your opinion is respected within the community.
yes, and
Right.
these
Right.
people are using these terms for a reason. They're using them because they relate to these terms. So it tells you that this isn't just like the work of the person who coined the term, but everybody seems to relate to this word. Like how we all adopted shade because we all realized there's a much better word that we can use now in our everyday language to make communication more effective because we talk about this concept. It's the same with incels. And
Mhm.
another thing I think is really interesting about their language is that use spreads across communities. Again, with the word shade, which was started by typically Black LGBT people, we're using it half a world away. And this can tell you a lot about the beliefs that overlap or are dangerously close to each other. So, for example, it's one thing for words like cuck or black pill, red pill to show up on incel subreddits where they have originated. It's another when you start seeing it pop up across diverse alt right factions, which happens to be the case when it comes to incel language. You'll see a lot of conservative right wing subreddits parrot the same language. And it kind of tells you that there's a little bit of a connection here between these communities. So,
Mhm.
let's get on to the hard and awful work of talking about the terms that the incel community uses. So extra trigger warning in this point because we will be discussing concepts and this was uncomfortable for me to research. It might be uncomfortable for you to hear. So extra care for anyone who needs it. So first thing we need to talk about when we talk about incels is we talk about the pills. So I want to ask our resident film buff here,
Mhm.
Jobeb, can you explain to us the concept of the pills, or the origin of the pill idea?
Right. So it's a really popular. It's one of the most famous scenes in the last what 20 plus years. It's Morpheus offering the red pill and the blue pill to Neo to wake him up to go down the rabbit hole, as it were. The blue pill would keep him in the matrix, whereas the red pill would awaken him to the truth, right? And because the Columbine shooters were inspired by the Matrix and edge lords and the black trench coats and everything, the incels adopted this idea of coolness, let's say, and they latched onto the movie uh, as a metaphor, I suppose. So they adopted the red pill, blue pill to mean somebody who is still a sheep, who is still, playing by the rules that society has put for you, man. You're just blind. You're just a Chad. You're just trying to be a Chad. Or if you're red pill, if you have ascended, if you were awakened, if you were wise to the game that the world is playing on incels. There you
So
go.
basically, if you take the red pill in this scenario, you're like the more enlightened one. You're given
Mhm.
information that makes your life infinitely harder because you understand it, but
Mhm.
also it's the quote unquote truth. And what's better, it's better to face the truth than to live a blissful lie. So if we apply this to inceldom, I won't even get into how weird it is that they adopted the Matrix, which is made by the Wachowski
Yeah.
sisters, and it
Yeah.
can be read as an allegory for being a trans person.
It is. It is an allegory for being a trans person.
Yeah,
That's what
exactly. So
Parang di
it's
nag-research.
there's a little bit of a disconnect there. I won't even get into that because that's like film criticism. But let's get
Mhm.
into what red pilling has become now for the incel community. So, according to the Anti Defamation League, while it originated there, it now actually symbolizes or says something about the dedication of a person has to an extreme ideology or cause. So, sorry, ideology or cause. So, if you're red pilled, it means that you have a particular affinity for a certain cause. In this case, it would be misogyny. So you
Mhm.
can
Mm.
find red pilling in not just in the incel community. There's also a variety of red pills. There's red pills for like
Right.
race and all sorts of other things. What we're going to focus on today is the red pilling in terms of like gender, sexuality.
So
Basically,
red
more of
Um,
a
pill is
weaponized
an
term for
alt,
being woke.
Woke in their terms, like
Yeah.
like a
they are
far. So
woke.
red pill is for far right. Like like far right groups. Is that what it is?
Yes, more or less.
There's a
Okay.
lot of low overlap, definitely. It tends to be like right wingers, and they use similar language, but they are referring to different kinds of red pilling. So in the incel community specifically, red pilling is often the first step of radicalization in any ideology, whether it's misogyny or racism or whatever. But it symbolizes the general shift from one set of beliefs that are like foundational to another set of beliefs. So in the incel community, this red pill takes in the form of, I guess, the shift into blaming women, the shift into
Right.
quote unquote seeing women as the issue behind.
So to be red pill isn't exactly to be like a staunch believer. It's when you're awakened to the
Yeah, but to be
cause,
awakened
right?
is to be a believer already. To be
But
awakened
like a
is to
staunch
believe these
believer, like
things.
when you okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So
because when
like
you say
it's
I've
okay.
taken the red pill, is I've committed to this because you can't
yeah,
untake the
Okay.
red pill.
yeah.
Okay,
You
gets,
know,
gets,
you
gets.
can't.
It's
Yeah,
that's not an involuntary thing. You have chosen this path.
yeah, you've chosen to take the
Yeah,
red pill.
yeah.
So this idea of the red pill is shared in what we call the Manosphere, which is a disgusting term for the overall community of incels, pickup
Manosphere.
artists, men's rights activists, and MGTOW. I don't know if that's how it's pronounced, but it's short for men going their own way. These are basically men who are the vol cell community. They think that women aren't worth it anymore, and they're gonna go their own way. So
Mhm.
that's what
We are
MGTOW
above that. We're
is.
so enlightened. We don't even need women
We
anymore,
don't,
man.
yeah,
We're
like
just going to
who
like
cares?
reproduce
That's so
asexually.
gay.
Yeah,
Uh,
so that
That's
is
so
the
gay.
manosphere. So
Okay.
you can see how the incels have shared beliefs among this community. So in the MRA circles and by extension incel communities, they have as Kai mentioned, a misogynistic and kind of dystopic point of view. So are you guys familiar with the Pareto principle? No,
Pareto
okay. So
principle.
the
just not by
Pareto
name.
principle, not by name. Yeah. So the Pareto principle is also known as the 80-20 principle. And this can be applied to many things. Like 80% of this is like 20% of results, whatever. 80% of customers give you 20% of business. I don't know, whatever. So they applied the Pareto principle to themselves. In the incel world, the 80-20 rule is 80% of women desire 20% of men. So from here
I'd
we
like to
can
see how
see,
they got that. That's
well,
just a number they pulled out of their asses, man.
the Pareto principle is like a widely held, like, I wouldn't say it's a rule, it's just a principle of a thing. It's like it's supposed to be a shorthand for a variety of things. And
Okay,
it does
okay,
apply in very broad strokes,
okay,
like 80% of people make 20% of wealth. See, it kind of works even though the numbers aren't
okay.
exact. But they decided to apply it in this way. And this tells you a lot about their thinking, where they like to they rate people based on attractiveness. You will
Mm-hmm,
always see incels rating people as an 8 out of 10, 6 out of 10, 10 out of
mm-hmm,
10, 3 out of 10.
mm-hmm,
And they believe at its core that women and men on the same level of
mm-hmm.
attractiveness should be paired up in a just society. So in a
Right.
just society, according to incels, if you're a 5 out of 10, you date a 5 out of 10.
I'm sorry, but in a
But
just society, I think the women get the
Hmm.
better end of that deal. Have you seen some of the couples out in the world? Man, it's like beautiful
well,
women
that's
with
what
ugly dude after ugly dude after ugly dude.
that is
In
what
a
well,
just
incels are
society.
saying, that
Yeah.
it's not fair.
A
We
just
don't live in a just
society.
society.
No, what they're saying is they're basically rationalizing that the reason that they're celibate is because, like, if everything were just, they would have had a partner by now. It's not wanting to look inward and thinking that maybe that there's something wrong with me. It's the system must be unfair because knowing who I am as a person, I should have a woman by now. That's what the thinking is.
Yeah, it's basically if women in my league stop
Hmm.
trying to date out of their
Yeah,
league, I
yeah.
would have a partner right now.
And so you resent women for wanting men that you feel intimidated by, and you resent men for hugging all the women.
Exactly. And red pilling
It's
in this particular
mm-mm.
community specifically is the realization that feminism is is the reason why this is happening, because women are empowered now to date above their station. And feminism is at
Oh
fault
God,
because we
that
gave
is
them too
hilarious.
many rights.
Yeah.
Wow.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
So
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
basically, they believe that men don't really have privilege or advantage because women hold all the power in this sexual marketplace because we get to decide who we allow inside our vaginas. And they also view it as a mathematical issue, and odds are stacked against them because they're ugly, according to them. According to them. I'm not saying they are. I don't know every incel in the world. But if I'm basing it by Elliot Rogers, he was not an ugly man.
No.
He was a
Really?
perfectly fuckable, desirable twink guy. Like he's a good looking dude, and yet he
Mm-hmm.
felt he was not attractive enough to get a partner. So it actually
Mhm.
has nothing to do about your attractiveness, but your assumed place on the totem pole
Right. It's your
is
self
what I
perception. It's your self esteem, really.
Right.
yes, it is your self-esteem.
I
So
think
of course
that's kind of what's glaring about it. Like what Jobim just said. Like this whole movement feels like a self-esteem issue on
It is.
roids.
It
Like
is
it's a big self-esteem issue that was multiplied like
with
a
testosterone.
hundredfold. On yeah, it's like self-esteem on bad, like horrible self-esteem
Really,
on testosterone.
what this whole episode is about is trying to parse what happens when low self-esteem meets high self-entitlement, because the world has told you that as a white man this is what you deserve. The world has told you that as a white man you should be desirable, you should be this, you should be that. And make no mistake, majority of uh incels are either white men or Asian men, because I don't know why. I think because Asian men have the lowest self esteem, and white men have just like the perfect cocktail, I guess. But
so
yeah, it does happen a lot, and it's just what do you call this? Low self esteem meets high entitlement.
Mm-hmm.
So what
Mm-hmm.
happens when this wonderful combination comes together? According to Red Pill, there are three outcomes for men. You either become an incel, which they are, or you're a normie cuck. Basically, you're a person who's not red pilled. You took the blue pill. You decided not to enlighten yourself about the game, and because you are a normal person who's probably not the 20% of men, you are being actively cucked by your partner who is cheating on you with a variety of big penised, chisel jawed,
Hmm.
32 abbed men. That is
Hmm.
the idea of a normie cuck. It's that your partner is cheating on you with men who are much more attractive than you are. And then the
Yes.
third option is you become an alpha, which is the person that your partner cheats on you with. Basically, the person who gets all the women. There are three outcomes for 7 billion, for 3.5 billion men or 4 billion
Hmm.
men. There are three outcomes. So this is the general red pill ideology. And then if you get deeper, you have the black pill ideology, which I would say is much more dogmatically hopeless and nihilistic. So black pill incels think that things are stacked against us, and then the really important addition of there's no hope. This is this is forever. You're born ugly
Hmm.
and you're doomed to be ugly for the rest of your life, and therefore you'll be unlovable.
It's like
Basic
nihilistic despair, sexual
Mm.
nihilistic despair.
It's like there's no point in even trying to make
Yeah.
your life better. There's no point in even trying to pick up artist your way through because it's just not going to happen for you, bro. That's what black pill says. It's basically jumping from I've never had sex or a date to I'm forever
To
unlovable and I will die
Right.
alone. It's that
Yeah.
catastrophizing. And the thing is, they try to prove this with scientific studies, they try to prove it with data. But basically, the conclusion they've arrived to is I can't change myself. Change has to happen on a systemic level, not an individual one, for this to work out. And honestly, they're so close. They're so close.
They're like the flat earthers of sex, I think,
of like of gender discourse. They
of
are the
gender
flat
discourse.
earthers
Yeah.
of gender and sexuality discourse. That is so it's fascinating. Like just
Yeah.
how they have put so much thought into this,
Yeah. No,
into this, into this
they try
defeatism.
they
Go.
try really hard. I mean, also the purpose for the reason that inceldom is so elaborate is an attempt to legitimize something, to legitimize the movement, right? That when you make
Exactly.
something systemic, when you make it into a system that people have to learn, people have to conform to, it gives it a sort of official feeling. It gives it an official sense, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The thing is, I do agree that there are some systemic roots of this. Beauty standards, strict gender roles,
Hmm.
strict ideas of what masculinity and femininity have to be, things like that, right? But instead of blaming those systems, they instead
Right.
blame feminism.
Right.
So
Right. Right.
they
Right.
have the right issue, wrong target, wrong person to
Hmm.
be mad at.
It's just
So
misplaced.
for black pilled incels, there are three options. There's what they call LDR, lie down and rot. Then they also have the option of suicide. So there are posts sometimes on Reddit that are tagged "sui fuel," as in it will make you want to kill yourself because of how sad and hopeless it is. And these people keep posting it. They're feeding, and we're gonna talk more about how this is a form of self harm in part two of this episode. So the third option, which we're going to bring up our lovely favorite Elliot Rogers here, is what they call going ER. So going ER is to go Elliot Rogers, which is also called siege pilling. There's so many
Mhm.
words, dude. So
Yeah.
they call it siege pilling, where the only out to this terrible system, if in the Matrix their out was to fight the aliens, right? The out, according
Not
to them, is to
aliens, but okay, yeah.
sorry. I I was asleep through half of the Matrix. My
The
bad.
bad computer programs, but yeah, go
Yes,
on.
the bad computer program. So you fight the bad computer program is what it is in the Matrix. Here, the only out is mass terror and violence. Basically, it's a death cult. You have
Right,
people
right,
here
right.
who want to die and have no regard for human life because everything's meaningless and everything's rigged against them.
Hmm.
So I will give a trigger warning for this next part because we're going to talk about some other kinds of pills. So black pill, red pill are the most common. We also have rape cells. So these people think that all sexual interaction between men and women are or should be coercive. So they think women cannot think for themselves and therefore cannot consent. And even if they can, they think there needs to be a dominant and a submissive in a relationship, a dominant and a submissive person in the relationship. And they also believe that women who are raped are somehow relieved on a primal level because it shows that the man is strong and therefore can take care of her. So I'll give you like a few minutes, a few seconds to process that because there's a lot going on in that chunk of words.
Makes me want to throw up. I'm sorry, that just makes me want to throw up. Like this, hearing it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah, we have customers in the comments going multiple question marks. What? And keyboard smash. Yes. So this is
Hmm.
a subculture of the pills in the incel community. We also have pink pill or fem cells. These are female incels. And the thing is, the male incels in the community think this group can't be real because there's always going to be men willing to sleep with women, even if they're ugly, quote unquote. Although, as we've established earlier, the original incel was actually a woman. But they now have to have their own term because apparently these guys think it's impossible for a woman to feel unlovable and undesirable. To any women or female presenting people out there, this is not true. It's totally normal to feel undesirable and unlovable. Doesn't necessarily make you a femcel, but seems like these people don't want you in your in their community anyway. Anyway, other pills. We have the dog pill, the idea that women would rather sleep with dogs than with them. Then we have the reverse dog pill, which, to be fair, might just be a joke, but somebody actually posited this on a Reddit thread where if women would rather sleep with dogs than with them, then they might as well just sleep with dogs. So that was the trigger warning for bestiality.
Okay.
We're done with that part now. At least we're done with the bestiality part. Worse though, we also have race cells, where it's the idea that you're an incel because you're not attractive if you're not white. And I'm really sorry for this part. So we have black cells, then we have curry cells, which I'm guessing is related to Indians, and then we also have rice cells, which I'm guessing is related to Asians.
Hmm.
So
Which is
these
weird because
people,
technically Indians are Asian, right?
yeah, but
yeah.
they're separate for
Okay.
some reason. I
Yep.
don't know.
Mm.
But yeah, you
Then
can
you
see
have
here
one
how,
for
yeah, so they think
basically everything, man. Height cell, mental cell, drug cell, wrist. What is a wrist cell?
I want you to take a stab at what you think wrist cell means.
I think it's somebody who has well, just using what I think an incel would use. The terms that I think an incel would use is a guy with feminine wrists.
I think
That
it's
is
I think it's a masturbation thing.
Okay, yeah,
okay.
yeah, okay.
Well, between the two of you, it's actually Jobim who hit the nail on the head. It's basically people who think they are loveless because their wrists are too small and delicate.
Yours was too
Yeah.
clever, Kai. You have to think more simply for these people.
I mean, the other ones are height
It makes
cell.
sense, right?
Yeah,
Height
yeah.
height
Yours was too
cell.
smart.
They think they're too short. So wrist
Right,
cell would be like, what would they obsess over? Tiny wrists.
right. So, what are
So
some
yeah,
other
that's
terms?
all right. So some other terms you need to know are the alpha, beta, sigma, omega male. Basically, this is a hierarchy
Mhm.
of men based on attractiveness
Mhm.
and success. I don't want to go into this because I think we can probably spend an entire episode about these
Right.
hierarchies, and I think we will in the future. There's also the idea of hypergamy, which sounds like you're marrying a lot of people, but it's more you marry above your league. So, this is what they think women are doing in the 80-20 principle. And the
Mhm.
reason why they have no sex is because women are dating or having sex above their level of attractiveness, leaving nothing for these poor, ugly boys. And then we have my favorite word of the day, femoids. So, femoids is the term that instead of using woman, or even the worse, but at least an English word, female, they decided to use the word femoids, which kind of like really obviously dehumanizes women because it makes you look like subhuman, non human, kind of robotic. And this is what Natalie Wynn of ContraPoints calls the nerdy style of misogyny. It's like you're mixing sci-fi and misogyny, and you're being like, we're gonna call them femoids because I don't understand them and they're below me. So that's a fun word. Even worse than females. So we also have a couple others like roasty, the idea that if you have sex with a lot of men, your vulva starts to look like roast beef.
That's weird. Who
Uh,
doesn't love roast beef?
I
I
love
love
roast
roast beef.
beef. It's always my
Love me
Subway
roast beef.
order. Love
Hmm.
me some roast beef. And also, just a note, your vagina and vulva look the way they do. It has nothing to do with how much sex you have. All right. So other things, we got the term cuck, which I'm sure we've all heard. You know, this is a kink term, which means someone who enjoys watching their partner have sex with someone else, and it has been corrupted by the incels to demean any man who is perceived to take a subservient or inferior position to a woman in any way. So if you allow your woman to talk to other men, you're a cuck. If you don't control her every move and check her texts, you're a cuck, according to these incels. Then we also have the trifecta of incel terms: Chads, Stacy's, and Becky's. So I want to know what y'all have heard about the Chads, Stacy's, and Becky's of this world.
Right, I do know what those are. A Chad is like the alpha dude, right? A Stacy is the kind of girl that incels want, but the Chads get, and Becky's are the beta Stacys.
That was actually a quite good and succinct description. So
Hmm.
you have your Chads who are your traditionally attractive men. And I know we mentioned race cells earlier. So I do want to mention that apparently there are racial terms for Chads of who are non-white. So apparently if you're a black Chad, you're a Tyrone. If you're
Hmm.
an Asian Chad, you are a Chang. And if you are an Indian Chad, you are a Chad Preet. I know, like
Mm,
Okay.
we're
mm,
gonna get through this episode eventually.
mm,
Uh,
mm, mm.
then you have your Stacys and your Beckys. Your Stacys are your hot women who don't ever have to work because they're like so hot they could be sugar babies.
Hmm.
And then you have your Beckys, who are your normal average women who aren't Instagram models. So I don't
Hmm.
know if we count as Becky's or Stacy's. It's honestly quite arbitrary and
Yeah,
very difficult to delineate. So these
it's
are
all
some of the
really just it's all just terminology used to refer to them in a certain light. Like you know what archetypes they're talking about, and you can refer to them different ways, but they just needed to come up with derogatory terms for them.
Yeah, and they're classifying people into literally two groups for each gender,
Right.
and again, they only have two genders in their list because we
Mm-hmm.
won't even get started on their transphobia. But it tells you a lot about how they see the world. That there's like only if you're a man, you have two choices. If you're a woman, you have two choices,
Yeah,
and
it's
they're all
very binary thinking.
Mhm.
There's
and
like no.
everyone wants a Stacy. Nobody wants a Becky, but they feel owed sex by the Beckys because you're not hot enough to be picky, according to
Right.
them.
Right.
Okay, so let's give everybody a little bit of a break. That was part 1 for incels. Make sure to stay tuned for part 2, where we'll talk about the most violent incels in history, as well as the psychology and sociology a little bit behind incels. So we'll be right back after this break.
We knew there was no other way. We knew what we had to face, but it still hurts when it happened. I thought my emotions would dampen, but I still don't know where it all went wrong. I must have lost it along the way. The smile you gave me, if I'd known that you would love me only until here, I would have held it dear. Oh, my memory betrays me. The touch of your skin just won't escape me. If I'd known that you'd be gone, I wouldn't have held on. Maybe this would be easier, but
That was How Can I Forget, a new release from singer-songwriter Erin Lee. Shortly after the release of her debut EP, Paper Flowers, Lee has never let her style of vocal harmony and instrumentation keep her within the confines of a single genre, using her creativity and versatility as a self-taught producer to branch out into the OPM scene even further. She is one of the faces that make up two of her other side projects, namely acoustic duo CJ and Aaron and Lily Stars Records indie folk duo Lily on the River. You can stream their music now on Spotify. And if you are an artist that wants to be featured on the show, we would be honored. Send your clips to nowopenph@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back to Now Open the Podcast, the sex education podcast that's more sex than education. Sorry, the audio stuff threw me off. Anyway, my name's Trisha.
My name's Kai.
And I am Jubim, sex changed. I'm kidding, I'm Presh.
So you may have noticed Jobim is gone. We had a comment. What happened to Jobim? He was eaten by a fuck, I forgot the name.
Of what?
What are those horrors? Cosmic horror. Never mind. Anyway, I fucked that up. So this week instead, we are talking about involuntary celibates or incels, a subculture that began as a support group for the dateless that eventually evolved into a violent misogynistic hate group with a body count that rivals our very own PNP. I'm just kidding. No body count could ever rival our PNP. So, in part 1, we discussed the basics of being an incel, what it is, where the term came from, and the vocabulary that incels use to police and communicate with each other. This is part 2 of incels, where we'll talk about some of the most infamous, terrifying incels and what could be going on in the mind of someone who subscribes to this harmful ideology. Trigger warnings again. We have misogyny, rape, sex, pickup artistry, no more bestiality, I hope, violence, murder, assault, self-harm, and suicide. So,
All right.
Kai,
So
let
let's-
us talk about some of the most infamous incels. Do you have
Whew.
a manok?
Let's go. My first manok for the night is George Sodini. On August 4, 2009, George Sodini opened fire at an LA fitness health club at Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. 3 women were murdered, and 9 other people were injured before Sodini killed himself. And he expressed sexual frustration and complained of constant rejections by women on a website registered in his name. Sodini and his actions have been embraced and glorified by some members of incel communities who sometimes refer to incel violence as going Sodini.
The next incel that we're going to talk about is the next person that they term going something. So we're going to talk about Elliot Rogers, our everyone's favorite incel. Just kidding. So we've already established that Elliot Rogers wrote a manifesto and went on a little bit of a killing spree, but his exact body count would be 6 people. He murdered 6 people in a spree killing, and he injured 14 others before killing himself in 2014. So, as we mentioned in part 1 of this episode, we connected the first mass murder to Elliot Rogers. And this really kind of brought to light the misogyny and glorification of violence that is the mainstay of many incel communities. And he was one of the first to really self-identify as an incel, and he wrote the longest manifesto known to mankind. Guess how many pages he wrote, Presh? How many do you think Elliot Rogers wrote?
No idea. 500. I don't know.
That is a lot of pages. No, Elliot Rogers wrote 137 pages discussing his involuntary celibacy and why he wants to take revenge on all of the women that rejected him. So he was an active member of the pickup artist community, and he referenced it several times in his manifesto. And today, his legacy is that if you go on a mass murder spree, I don't think they call it going Sodini anymore. It's more likely that they will actually call it going ER or going Elliot Rogers. What a legacy to have.
Amazing. Amazing work, Elliot Rogers.
Okay, for our next incel, we have William Atkinson, who killed 2 people before killing himself on December 7, 2017, in Aztec, New Mexico, in a shooting at Aztec High School, where he had previously been a student. He had used the pseudonym Elliot Roger, on several online forums and praised the Supreme Gentleman, a term Roger has used to describe himself, which has since become a common reference among incel communities. Atkinson had also posted far-right content online.
Next up, we have Nicholas Cruz. Nicholas Cruz was accused of killing 17 people and injuring 17 others on Valentine's Day 2018 in a shooting at Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Allegedly also motivated by other extremist views, Cruz had previously posted online that Elliot Rogers will not be forgotten.
I am muted. They literally call this man Saint Elliot. You know, he sparked I feel like people watched him and were like, I can do that too. I can vent out my frustration by murdering like dozens of people or several people. And unfortunately, our next incel also took some notes. We have Armando Hernandez, who opened fire in a mixed use development in 2020. This was during the pandemic. This man did not get the stay-at-home orders, and he went out and shot a bunch of people. There were quite a few who were critically injured, and some suffered minor injuries. As far as I know, I don't think there are any bodies associated with this guy. So thankfully, everyone left that incident alive. But we can't ignore that Hernandez did also self-identify as an incel, and he also said that he wanted to target couples specifically because I guess he was very frustrated that he could not be in a relationship. So He also apparently, okay, this is like a very interesting extra bit about Hernandez. He sent a video of the attack to a woman he wished to impress.
Sexy.
Can you imagine getting that video?
No,
It's like
I don't
just
wanna. I don't
please.
even wanna imagine it. It's like,
I'd rather he send me a dick pic for the rest of my life, every day for the rest of my
you know
life.
what I mean? Like, just give me different angles, like just miniature, like just with different ways to show me your dick. Just don't do that.
No, just don't do that. Don't do that.
All
All
right.
right. How about one last incel?
Okay, so we have Alex Minasian. Am I saying that correctly? Who knows? Right, on April 23rd, 2018, vehicle ramming attack in Toronto, Ontario. Minasian was convicted of 10 counts of first degree murder and 16 counts of attempted murder. That's a high ass fucking number, y'all. Sorry for swearing. But shortly before the attack, Minasian had allegedly posted on Facebook that the Incel rebellion has already begun and applauded Roger. Oh my gosh, of course he does. And the term incel rebellion is sometimes used interchangeably with the term beta uprising, which refers to a violent response on incels' perceived sexual deprivation. Following the attack, a poster on a website created to supersede a hashtag, what is this? Backslash r incels wrote about Minisian. I hope this guy wrote a manifesto because he could be our next new saint. All right. And that was the newsstand. Now sitting.
Oh, sorry, I muted you like halfway through that. I'm sorry. Just for the feedback. So the reason why we listed all of these incidents is because we really want to drill home the fact that inceldom, it's violently misogynistic. It's not your run of the mill microaggressions, mansplaining, or even your run of the mill sexual harassment, which should not be, we should not have a run of the mill for that, but we do. It's something even more intense. It's something that is, there's an entire subculture of these people, and it's really difficult to understand them. It's really difficult to see how they got to this point where they're committing mass murder. And that's not
Mm-hmm.
something
Mm-hmm.
we should take lightly. We should take these people seriously because they are forcing us to take them seriously. They
Mm-hmm.
have a body count already, even though according to one of our comments, the incels claim not to have a body count. I guess they don't claim to, but we can tie several incidents. So after this break, we will be talking more about what could go on in their minds and how this happens. And hopefully, maybe, if this is something that you're getting into or someone that is getting into, hopefully you can nip it in the bud before it gets there by understanding how they work. But before that, Kai, why don't you take us into one of our segments for today?
For today's opening up, we have an anonymous letter. They write, "Dear Now Open, I feel like I'm on the brink of lesbian bed death. What do I do to spice things up?"
I love how it just went quiet with the three lesbians.
I know, right? Three gay girls just like,
It do be like that, baby. It do be like that.
It could be like that sometimes. So, does anyone want to go first? No.
Not it. Not it.
Okay, I'll go first. So, first, I want to dissuade the notion of lesbian bed death as a separate phenomena from general dead bedrooms. There's no proof that lesbians have more bed death than heterosexual or gay homosexual couples. This is not true. It's just a lot of the studies that showed these results didn't have very specific verbiage about what sex contains. So to most people, sex is like some kind of penetration, right? So people answering the survey were like, well, we didn't do penetration the last time, so we didn't have sex. Then there's also the idea that as a person who has had sex with both men and women, having sex with men takes like 5 minutes, maybe 10 if you're
Mm.
lucky. But having sex with women is like 45 minutes, 30 minutes if you're lucky. So,
You can't
there's
do a quickie with lesbian sex. Like you just,
a quickie
I
is like
mean, it's
30 minutes.
I know, but like the heterosexual quickie, you know what I mean? Like, oh, we're gonna like fuck in the bathroom and finish up in 15 minutes.
Right. So, really, the explanation behind lesbian bed death as we know it is because, you know, lesbians have less sex, maybe, but they're also it says nothing about pleasure. So, you could be having not a lot of sex, but you could still have a lot of pleasure. So, my advice, based on all these statistics that I've just said, is to find ways to introduce pleasure, whatever kind of intimacy. It may not be sex directly. It could be mutual masturbation. It could be watching porn together. It could be phone sex. It could be basically introduce pleasure back into the equation. And that's all you need. It's not about frequency, it's about pleasure. Talk to your partner, figure out what it is that makes you both hot and horny. Do that.
Nice. I think for me, I don't think. Wait.
I think personally, like in this situation,
To unmute yourself.
I think that it's some. I personally think that it's a communication thing. I mean, you can be effective communicators, like you can be great communicators, right? But like that doesn't necessarily translate into like the bedroom all the time. Because I mean, communicating about certain things like in the relationship, like vanilla things in the relationship, might not always translate to like the things you could like talk about in bed. That's what I think, at least. Where it's like, for example, you've both communicated you want to try this, you want to try that, right? But like it still gets murky as to like how far you can go, or like sometimes someone's too tired to even do the fantasy you talked about, you know. um yeah, I think I'm not really like, giving advice, am I? I'm just like feeling this person really hard. So yeah, that's all I have to say.
I think for me, it's not much. This isn't really much of how do I spice things up, but it's more of what is the reason behind that quote unquote lesbian bed death. Right? I'm assuming that you are with a partner or you have somebody that you're having sex with, and you used to have more sex than you are having sex right now. That. Those are just my assumptions that I'm reading your post, right? And so I think my mindset is usually coming into what is happening, what changed, why have things changed, and how do we address or how do we adjust to these kinds of changes, right? So it's not really more of spicing things up, but it's kind of looking into why things happen, and maybe you can find something that you could draw from and say like, oh, maybe this was an issue, maybe because
Mm-mm.
she's just tired because of work, or maybe because she doesn't find me attractive when I pick my nose or something like that, it's just it's stuff like that where why does my partner not want to have sex with me, or why do I not want to have sex with my partner? And once I feel like once you tackle that, then you are on like your next way into breaking that lesbian bed death, almost the brink of lesbian bed death. That's just personally what I think and how I would go about if I were in your situation. Yeah.
All right. That's amazing advice. I go with what they both said. I take
I
it.
think we should replace Jobim with Bresh for opening up at the very least, because Jobim does not give the best advice.
Joe Bim
Just
will
fuck
give you
someone
his
else.
anti-advice.
Whatever Jobim says, do the opposite.
Don't do it.
Uh,
Don't do it. And that was tonight's opening up. If you'd like to send us your anonymous questions or confessions, you can submit through our opening up form. All right. So now let's go back to the discussion. Let's talk about the incel mindset. So, like, what is it about the ways in which incels would pretty much like think about, I mean, we've been talking about the entire night, and we've had this preposterous like at least I think we've had this really preposterous viewpoint on, like, why are you doing this? So let's look into the incel pipeline and go a little bit deeper into that and try to figure out why they do what they do. So first off, the incel mindset. Now, according to a study where through an online ethnography or a tracing through time of incel identified subreddits and a deep reading of Elliot Rogers' manifesto, this researcher found that social sexual capital is paramount to incels. Incel identified communities now hold a fairly stable view that work or financial capital and fitness or practices of socialization, erotic capital, that they find that financial and erotic capital are useless. Effectively, they see social sexual capital as the ultimate marker of status and do not believe that they can exchange other forms of capital for sexual access. Here, they see themselves as being owed access to women, owed a degree of social sexual capital, and do not acknowledge an element of exchange present in the sexual marketplace that they envision.
Sorry, Kaya, I have a question. What do you mean by social, sexual capital, financial capital? What are all these about?
Ayun. So financial capital is basically work, right? So like earning money, you know? So when they say social capital, it's kind of like what makes you, I don't know how do you say it? Like it's what gives you value in society, right?
It's your perceived attractiveness and like how desirable you are in society, I guess, right? Is that what it
Ayun, like
is?
so yeah, that's social sexual capital. So when you say social capital, like a general term, social capital, that's kind of what parang gives you worth or what you believe gives you worth in society. Diba? So when you say social sexual capital, it's like the social capital that you have in society is ultimately tied to what Trisha just said, like looks, what did you say? Sorry. Like your sexual prowess, shit like that, you know? To what this researcher found, and I'm sorry I'm not mentioning her name. I kind of like missed it putting here, but the citation is in the post. What this researcher found is that financial capital, like money, and erotic capital, like fitness or practices of like just flirting, these are useless because social sexual capital, the things that Trisha said, is what they believe is the ultimate marker of status. So they can't exchange that for other things. They believe that that's like um the paramount marker of status in society. But what they see is they're owed that. They're owed access to women. They're owed a degree of this social sexual capital. But they don't acknowledge that it's an exchange. Like if a woman gives this to you, you have to give it back to them. It's like a two-way road. They don't acknowledge that. So that's one thing she found. Did I make that? Is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then second, what she found is that it's a competition with other men. The way they view the world. So the study really just tried to understand how do they view the world, right? So first, it was social sexual capital being paramount. Second, it's a competition with other men. There's her name, Menzie. Menzie, the researcher, found that incels desire a prescribed status and power that they believe is earned through having an objectively desirable romantic partner in order to display their masculinity and attractiveness to other men. So, in essence, what they see is that the women are like Stacy's are like their key to going above other men. And lastly, what she found is that they believe in a sex deficit. So incels perceive their experiences as one of a sex deficit where there's deficit of sex for them. They don't get enough sex. That creates a deterministic and pessimistic framework for how incels read their own status. So that's what pushes their need for social transformation. That sex deficit, that idea na I don't have enough social sexual capital. I'm not hot enough. I'm essentially not hot enough, not fit enough, not cool enough. Kemerut. That's kind of what incites their need for social transformation in the way they see fit. They see displays of femininity as performative, moreover, and directed towards the approval of men. So it's kind of like women are seen as tokens towards their going above other men. Parang ganon. So that's kind of like how incels would view the world in a nutshell, according to Menzi.
Okay. So I have a couple of other theories, and I will admit I mostly copped this from YouTube philosopher ContraPoints, also known as Natalie Wynn. She had a 2018 video essay called Incels, where she proposes what is called Foppington's Law. So I think she created this one. Basically, Foppington's Law says that once bigotry or self loathing permeate a given community, it is only a matter of time before deep metaphysical significance is assigned to the shape of human skulls. So I will not even attempt to summarize her amazing 35-minute video on YouTube. So if you want to learn more about this, please do check out her YouTube channel. But basically, what she did in this video is she connected ideas of gender dysphoria, because Wynn herself is a trans woman, and inceldom. The idea is that the skull is permanent and unchangeable, right? You know, you are born with your skull, and that's just what your skull's gonna look like forever, unless you get plastic surgery. And this is kind of symbolic of the intrinsic characteristics of being a human. It's kind of what people can point to and be like, see, it's natural. And we don't see this obsession with skulls only in misogyny and inceldom. We also see it in like race. You know, how they were really obsessed with measuring black people's skulls to
Mm-hmm.
prove that they were inferior because they were smaller. So we've all, as a society, we do have an obsession with skulls and human anatomy. And the thing about incels is that they are obsessing over what they call a few millimeters of bone. Because if you think about it, it's really only a few millimeters of bone that stand between you and a completely different face. Like a few millimeters of bone will completely dictate how your face looks. And this is very similar to how trans women may also worry about how a few millimeters of bone make them look too masculine to pass as women. And conversely, same with trans men, that they few millimeters of lacking bone structure makes them look more feminine than they want to be. So there's this idea of self-loathing that is tied to obsession with skulls. Because you kind of want to say, see, it's doomed. I can't change anything about this. This is how I was born, and I cannot move through this caste system of attractiveness because my skull just happened to come out a certain way. So this really aligns with that very nihilistic, black pilly
Mm-mm.
view.
Mm-mm.
And I think naturally you can take Foppington's Law to further and basically call it what it is. It's a form of self harm. So, incels, a lot of them, these people are hurting. They're people who live in a society where being partnered and having sex is like one of the top markers of humanity and life experience and maturity. You know, like version is used as an insult. This is the society we live in. They are hurting and they want love, they want intimacy. And but by subscribing to these ideas, especially the idea that everything's hopeless, they are internalizing this cruelty towards themselves and manifesting it towards others. And they start creating these communities based on delusional, self-perpetuating self-loathing. So Kai, I want to ask you, what do your friends do when you post a fire selfie of yourself on Twitter?
Oh my
What
god,
kind
they're
of comments
like,
do you get?
it's like, yeah, bitch, go get it, go. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yes, queen, I'm
yeah,
living.
like, yes, you look good. I'm like, bitch, I know. You know what I mean? Like, they're always like just going supporting me.
So imagine if every time you post a selfie, um dozens if not hundreds of people critiqued every perceived flaw in your face, whether you knew it or not. How would that make you feel? Just
Fucked
every
up.
time you
I mean,
post
like,
this.
parang, damn, don't ruin my shine right now. Do it later. I mean, like, yeah, it's like,
Haters will hate, man. Haters will fucking
yeah,
hate.
but like hate
Sorry,
at the
I've
right
done it again.
time, bitch. Like, tangina, not when I just posted my selfie. Like, let me have
But
this
now
moment, and then okay,
imagine
fuck
that
it
they
up.
did
Go.
that and you've never had sex, you've never been on a date, you've never had anyone be like you're an attractive person, and these people shit on your selfie. How would you feel?
Never mind. I feel like shit, man. I feel like fucking shit. Never mind.
So that's kind of the mindset that we're working with here. So incels, they have this community that where they take each other down. They will post selfies of themselves knowing that they will absolutely get destroyed by their community because everything is supposed to be hopeless, right? There's no point in trying to change yourself. So because they believe that everything is hopeless, they have to perpetuate that belief. So let's say there's somebody who looks like you and you are very, very successful and you look like somebody else who is an incel. They will start to criticize you because if you look like them and you're not hopeless, then they have to accept that they're not hopeless, but they would rather criticize you and therefore themselves than accept that there might be a chance that someone might love them.
Remember when
So
I said that I know that incels is it comprises of a hate group? Now that we're going through it, I feel as though it's not. I feel a lot of it is hate towards each other more than it is hate. Like it's hate towards each other that is dissipated outwards towards the world, oh, specifically
absolutely.
women. You know what I mean?
They
Like,
they hate
yeah, it's
themselves
a
so
self-hating
much.
thing. Yeah, yeah, ayun.
So this is apparently what is called masochistic epistemology, where we can sum this up as whatever hurts is true. So they think that because it is painful and the truth hurts, then this must be the truth. And the truth is that they are ugly and hopeless. So they continue to participate in these behaviors because it reinforces their already awful beliefs about themselves and the world. So they're going to perpetuate this by constantly criticizing each other. So it's no wonder that these men have awful self esteem because they
Mm-mm.
are doing it to themselves and to each other.
Exactly. Damn, now I feel like that's like an empathetic stretch towards incels right now. And that wraps up our discussion on incels. What is the greatest thing you've the greatest? What is the what did you learn tonight? What's the greatest thing you learned tonight? I'll go with it. What's the greatest thing you learned tonight?
Honestly, for me, incels are people. You know,
Mm-mm.
their ideologies are shaped by their experiences and how they understand them. And
Mm-mm.
I don't know if I'm one to say, like, okay, I'm one to say, like, that's fucking stupid. Sorry. Again, this is my third. We should have a swear jar. I'm so not used to it. But
Fully fueled by fresh.
yeah, yeah. But these things that they understand are shaped by their experiences, and I can't be one to say that you can't believe in that, because this is how you understand the world, but at the same time this is wrong.
Yeah,
Objectively,
like for me, it was like this episode was so hard for me. I don't know, like it was hard for me to go through this episode primarily. I mean, I'm like a staunch feminist. Like I study feminism. You know what I mean? Like it was very hard for me to go through this episode, but having learned about this, about like this whole subgroup of people, like it really helped me understand, like, differing opinions and how there are really different viewpoints in the world. And at the end of the day, we are all people. That doesn't necessarily mean to say that I agree, or like it's easy for me to empathize with people that would that are very harmful, at least in my opinion. But I do agree with Presh that these are people. These are people.
Humans are strange, as Randall says.
Humans are strange. But
Humans
like,
are strange.
And humans can be bad.
man,
Humans can be bad and have bad thoughts, and humans can hurt other people. And like, these are people who are hurting, and
yeah.
they feel like the only way out is to hurt other people. And yes, we can blame the individual, and we do, because they still have to take responsibility for their actions. No one made them do these things, they made these choices. But we obviously have a systemic issue, and the black pillars and red pillars are not wrong here. There is a systemic issue as to why we prioritize sex as some form of social capital rather than just as an activity. Like, would we judge someone for not playing tennis? No, but we judge people for not having sex, and that's one of the things that feeds into this. Another thing is like conventional beauty standards, and we definitely have to rip those apart, because people are deserving of love, and not just for physical reasons. I mean, we can't
No, that is
com-
true.
and,
Yeah.
and we
I
can't
agree
completely
with that.
remove physical attraction. But the thing about these incels is, if you look at their pictures on these subreddits where they take each other down, they are totally normal looking people. they are
Exactly.
they're not Henry
Like,
Cavill, but neither
right.
am I.
Exactly. But it's just like it's really like it's this worldview for me that like I said, earlier, like it's hard for me to be empathetic for this subgroup, precisely because I have you tonight we talked about all the shit they've done and said toward, and the things they've created, the whole system against something am obviously very biased on, you know what I mean? And I just feel like it's a, like as what Carla just said, just because their experiences are valid, it doesn't mean they can't be wrong. And I feel as though, believe in what, personally for me, it's like believe in what you can believe in. But once you're hurting someone, that is something that, we have to like figure out somehow, because I can't stand by it. I just can't.
We need
Yeah.
to help these men, and we need to change some stuff.
And see, that's the danger. Like, if we ostracize them, then they're not gonna listen to us. And we're women. We're queer women, like the three of us right now. Maybe
Hmm.
Jobim, if you were here, then maybe they'd listen to him because he's a straight man. But the three of us are queer women, right? So we're how do we, like what Trisha said, like we want to help them out, quote unquote help them out. But then, like, if we come to them and say like, oh, we want to help you out because we're queer women, of course they're not going to listen to us, right? So now I'm stumped in like this thing now. How do I be compassionate towards them, and how do I understand them without them shutting me out, without them like saying, oh, she's just being whatever, whatever, you know
Well, unfortunately, you can't help people who don't want to accept your help. And that's where we're going to end with this particular episode, because there's so much more to talk about. We're definitely going to have future episodes about pickup artistry, men's rights activism, and like more of the details. But maybe through those, we can better understand what we're going to have to do to fix this, because it's an epidemic. It's an epidemic. It's not quite the body count of COVID, but it's getting there, and it will get there if we don't do anything about it. So we'll figure it out eventually. All right. So that is it for our episode. Would you like to promote anything, Kai or Presh?
Not tonight.
No
No,
promotions. Okay, we're not
no.
promoting anything because this episode made us feel bad. So,
No, sorry. I was too busy preparing for the next slide.
so instead, I will promote Now Open. It is our first anniversary this week, so I hope y'all let me promote it a little bit. Please do follow us on Facebook and Twitter. That's at Now Open PH, and we also have a Discord where you can hang out with the hosts, fans, and friends of Now Open. I will put it in the episode description and in the comments. And you can also check out our past episodes on YouTube, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe to our coffee page. That's coffee.com/nowopenph to get bonus content and other special perks. We have so much going on there now. Just check it out. It's pretty fun. We have behind the scenes videos from before our episodes. We got some other things going on, and we will be putting way more in the coming weeks. So make sure to subscribe. And also, if you subscribe to the VIP tier, you could get a 50% discount on all the merch that we are launching. We are launching a t-shirt and we are launching stickers, and you get to save a lot of money by giving us a little bit up front. So sweet deal, I think. And don't forget to join our Twitter spaces tomorrow. That is August 4 at the Now Open PH Twitter. We're going to just talk about this last year, hang out with our guests. And if you want to ask us questions, if you guys want to have a chance at the mic, tomorrow is the opportunity. So we hope to see you at 8 p.m. on our Twitter. I am excited to announce our next episode. So our next episode will be our last for a couple of weeks, not forever. We are taking a 2-month break in, 2 months to like 2-week break in August. So next week will be our last episode until August 31. We are talking about a topic near and dear to my heart. Our episode next week is Too Soft for Love. So, what are we talking about here? We're talking about people who are super sensitive, have a lot of emotions, love so fully, but it makes it difficult to have functioning, secure relationships.
Guilty. Guilty.
This episode is really just for me and Presh to air out our emotional baggage. So, if you'd
Oh
like to
man.
check that out, that would be next week. See y'all when we next open, everybody.